Okay, so some good news and some bad news. Unfortunately, Tom Arnone was not able to make it here. He had a death in the family, so he's at the funeral today. So the bad news is you have me. The good news is it's the last time you're going to see me up here, so that's a good thing. And then one other piece is we're running a little against time, so I'm going to go pretty quickly. But Tom and I are doing this presentation at the NUIA Spring Conference, which is coming up in June. So this is a very short version, and you'll have a longer version if you have interest in seeing more. So real quickly, we're talking about the art of public outreach within the science of wastewater. Enfield really came up against a referendum this last fall, and it was a pretty massive $36 million referendum that was on sewer. So they wanted to, it was important for them to pass to get through some things. And so I'll go through quickly what that was. A few facts about Enfield, we won't get into it too much. How do we engage, support, and what are effective public outreach tools are really the quick things we'll cover. So Enfield basically was in a state where they had not done a lot of improvements for a long time. They had an aging infrastructure, started in the 1930s, and the last real, it was built in the 70s, so 71, 72, and the last real upgrade, they had a minor thing they did in the 90s, and they hadn't done much. So they had a unique situation. There's only 6 or 7 communities or utilities within Connecticut that has an ad valorem system for doing their sewer, which means that the sewer fees come out of taxes. They don't come out of rates. So that presents a problem because you're always competing with other entities in town. So because they were ad valorem, you have sewer versus high schools, schools. You have sewer versus police. You have sewer versus fire. And I don't know what you guys think or what your experience is, but you usually lose those battles. So that's one of the reasons the sewer system hadn't been upgraded in a long time. So the most important thing and the first thing that had to be solved was the financial situation. The technical piece will take care of itself. Finance usually matters more up front particularly. So we had to answer those questions. So Enfield had the political will to change from a ad valorem system to a sewer fee structure. They were able to generate the rates that would generate enough money to do some capital improvements. They captured funding to reduce the user costs, and they had to pass this $36 million sewer referendum. And to do this, you need the public to support it, otherwise you're dead in the water. So just kind of stepping back for 1 second, why is public outreach so challenging for utilities? Because the people that run utilities, a lot of the people in this room, tend to be technical people that prefer to work with facts and known quantities. Wastewater professionals look at engineering science, biology. However, public outreach is more undefined. It's more artistic. It's more loose. And so it's kind of difficult for those two. The nexus of those two things is challenging for some people. Outreach requires time, focused effort, and investment. It definitely requires investment. There's a cost to public outreach and effective public outreach. And sometimes we just gloss over that. We say, it's logical, therefore the public will accept it, but it doesn't work that way. And lastly, campaigns must be tailored to each situation in the local climate. So I'll talk about this local climate. So what are the options? You really need to develop a plan, a public outreach strategy, and the plan has to have 4 components at a minimum. It has to have your goals, what you're trying to achieve, which in Enfield's case was passing a $36 million referendum. It has to have a schedule, a very clearly defined schedule. And this, you can see this graphic is a little tool we have. It's a wheel with all the months on it. And each month has certain things you have to do. And that also that's the matrix of options. So you have options of things to do. Well, within each month, you have to hit some of those things, and you have to continue to drive that. And then you have to have the responsible parties. Who's doing what? In Enfield's case, we were their consultants, so we did a bunch of the work. They had to do some work. DPW has to do work. The town councilors had to do work. A lot of people have to come together to make it all work. WPCA, the plant, et cetera. So talking about those matrix of options, lots of mediums. There's a lot of different options, and you can't see that chart, but that's a list. That's page 1 of 3 pages of different ways they can get the message out to the public. There's social media, the website, email, print media, word of mouth, TV, and others. And you need to use all of them. You cannot just ignore one because you're not comfortable with it, what have you. Another thing that was critical was to research how many votes were needed to pass the referendum. You know, you can go back and look at other referendums. How many people vote? How many people do you expect to vote in this particular election? And what's the number that you need to sway? That's how many people you have to convince. Be very strategic about it. So the first thing we'll talk just quickly on is social media. Absolutely critical. Whether you use it or not yourself, other people do, and it's not going away. Over 75% of all internet users use social media. 77% use Facebook. 63% use YouTube. 25% use LinkedIn, and 21% use Twitter. Those are pretty big numbers of people out there. Facebook has over 1.5 billion users monthly, and YouTube has a billion users monthly as well. So that's a pretty massive amount of people. You can't ignore that avenue. The typical digital consumer spends an hour and 49 minutes a day on social networks. So that's 1 in every 3 minutes online is done through social media. Got to use it. Americans use electronic media 11 hours a day. So live TV, you'll notice, is actually shrinking. Used to be people watched a lot of TV, and now they're actually time shifting to different TV. Games, DVDs, smartphones, radio, they're all different avenues, and it's widely used. So we were fortunate in Enfield's case. They had a social media strategy for the community already. The town had one. And I don't know how many people have social media strategies in your utilities or communities, if you just raise your hands. Yeah, hopefully a couple years from now we'll see higher number of hands going up because it's really critical. So just a real quick description of Enfield's social media strategy is you can go to their website, you can follow them on Twitter, on different social media areas. All the minutes get posted, all the different communications between the town departments get posted. Public Works had their own Twitter account, and that's the bottom right graphic. They would post things periodically. So how did we use it? Well, a simple way we used it is when we had a meeting, and it was just a project meeting, someone would step back, take a picture of the meeting, have a little bit of text, give it to the Public Works director, and he would post it. Say, hey, we're meeting on the sewer project today. And everyone that's following that Department of Public Works would see that the sewer project's happening. Just to keep it live, just to keep people aware that something's going on, and there's a lot of hard work going into it. Very important. So choosing the right platform is key. What about email? 72% of the US adults still prefer communication with organizations through email, so you have to use email. There's one utility that I was just talking to not too long ago, a power utility, that did a survey of their customers, and they were told that when there's a power outage, how did people want to know? How did they want to find out? Email was actually the second most important way. People want text messages. If you're at work, your power goes out at home, a text message that says your power went out, we're working on it. And then when it's restored, another text. That's even becoming more popular. So email is really important. But what about traditional media? 48% prefer post office, just regular mail. 34% do television ads, and 31% do print media. So you have to have an email strategy, no question. And that is shifting. 60% of those age 55 and older still like mail. So if you're reaching that constituency, you still have to go there. 29% of the millennials say the same. So that's definitely a change that we're seeing. So what did we use? I mentioned it's got to be a multifaceted strategy. In Enfield, we did mailings, and there's some samples of the mailing. We did bill stuffers. They had rates now. They were sending out invoices, so we were stuffing the invoices with mailers. We did TV, 3 different things on TV. We did a plant tour and posted it to the website, and people watched the plant tour. We did slides, a PowerPoint, a slide deck that was playing between programming, and we did an interview. There was actually an interview that was recorded and posted to the Enfield TV, the ETV site. We did newsprint, so we worked with the media. We gave a press release to some of the newspapers, but we also had the journalists come by and interview. And there are 2 different strategies, because one is the newspaper's perspective. how they see it, and they form their own article, and you cannot change it. The other was one that we gave them and provided them. Then there's face-to-face. Face-to-face is still critical. We live in small communities. We have to do things together. Enfield had farmers market concept that they were doing. We had a booth at the farmers market. So right next to the guy selling watermelons and potatoes and squash was the sewer booth saying, there's a referendum coming. You need to be aware of the project. Little demonstrations of how sewer kind of gimmicks, some giveaways, just candy. Got people over and you could have a conversation. And then the senior center, of course, was a critical constituency too. So posters, we put posters everywhere. We even use Stop and Shop. Where do people go in town? They go to the grocery store. So use it. Why not use the grocery store as a place to put information? And then actually we did a podcast as well. So the podcast was downloadable from the site. There's not a lot of people doing the podcast in Enfield, but there were some. So there was another avenue to get there. So a couple more points, and then we'll move on to the coffee break. But what do you say? You got to share the positive stories about sewer, about wastewater. Show off the service that the WPCA is providing to the community. Support the position with numbers and images. So people hear things and they learn things. But when they only hear it, they remember 10% 3 days later. This is a study that's been done. If a relevant image is paired with that same information, 65% of the information is retained 3 days later. So you're getting an incredible bounce when you show images that go with information. It just makes a big difference, so you have to do that. With content with relevant images gets 94% more views than content without. Be prepared for the conversation. Customers expect a response, especially when issuing a complaint. So 70% of Twitter users expect a response. So if you tweet, hey, we're having a meeting. If someone responds to that, hey, you're having a meeting, tell me more, you've got to respond. 70% of the people expect that, and 50%, or more than 50%, want the response in less than an hour. So you've got to be ready. The number jumps to 72% when they're issuing a complaint. So they really want to be heard. And sometimes just being heard is enough for people. So the bottom line is this. Put a very strong public outreach program together. The public was well informed. They understood the costs of improvements and investments. How do we know this worked? There were 3 referendums that November of 2015 in Enfield. One was for an energy performance contract that was free. It was essentially the energy savings was going to pay for the project. It failed. There was a school referendum that went out. It failed. And our $36 million sewer project passed. So we know this campaign worked. We have measurable results. The foundation's now set for the utility. People have a good understanding that it's a self-sustaining sewer future, and they're ready to move on with the capital project. So with that, as Tom said, we'll be around during the break. I think we're right up against the coffee break, and any questions, I'm around.